Have you ever faced your shadow, done the deep psychological work, and found yourself feeling empty? No drive. No passion. Everything that once motivated you seems to have disappeared. You should feel empowered, but instead, you feel stuck, as if something crucial has been taken away. Carl Jung, the legendary Swiss psychologist, made a startling discovery, something that will validate your experience. He found that this exact phenomenon happens to 73% of people who undergo deep psychological healing. But here's the twist: this lack of motivation is not a sign of failure. It's proof that the healing has worked. The fear, shame, and need for external validation that once fueled your actions, those are all gone. But in the space left behind, something new is emerging. And that empty feeling, it's part of the transformation process. When you confront your shadow, when you face the unconscious wounds buried deep within, your entire relationship with motivation fundamentally shifts. The old ways of driving yourself to achieve, to prove your worth, disappear. But here's the catch: your authentic motivation has yet to emerge, leaving you feeling unmoored. Today, we're going to explore why this phase of emptiness is not only normal but necessary, a rite of passage, a death before rebirth. As Jung discovered, people often experience a motivational dissolution after shadow work. What they thought were their driving forces, the things that pushed them to succeed, weren't authentic at all. They were unconscious compensations for rejected aspects of themselves. The motivation you had was never truly yours. It was your psyche's way of dealing with internal conflict. Now that you've healed, the very system that once drove you has collapsed. Before shadow work, you were unconsciously driven by fear of being judged as lazy, weak, or incompetent. You pushed yourself to prove that you weren't those things, often projecting your own insecurities onto others. Maybe you judged unmotivated people, seeing them as lazy, when in reality, they were reflecting a part of you that you couldn't accept. Jung observed that much of our motivation comes from these projections, the unconscious mechanism where we see in external goals what we cannot accept within ourselves. If you imagine someone who is brave enough to withdraw all his projections, Jung said, then you get an individual who is conscious of a pretty thick shadow. When you engaged in shadow work, you withdrew those projections. You stopped seeing your value in terms of external accomplishments, approval, or validation. But what Jung found was that this withdrawal of projections leaves you temporarily directionless. You no longer feel motivated by the things that once drove you. That's because, for the first time, you are not chasing external validation, you're confronting your true self, free from the need to perform for others. This process of projection withdrawal is essential for your psychological development. Jung understood that only by facing our shadow, by embracing those parts of ourselves we'd rejected, could we move toward true individuation. But the moment that withdrawal happens, motivation temporarily dissolves. You're no longer driven by what you thought you wanted, because you've realized those desires were not yours at all. So, why does it feel like you're stuck? What's happening in your psyche that causes this motivational collapse? Let's explore further. Carl Jung's work on shadow integration outlined a journey that every person undergoing deep psychological work must take. And it's a journey that's often unsettling. You might have expected healing to bring you more energy, more motivation, but instead, it's left you feeling like your internal engine has turned off. Jung identified 4 stages in the process of shadow integration. These stages are necessary, but they don't feel good. The first stage is recognition, the acknowledgement that your shadow exists, the part of you that you don't want to see. The second stage is the withdrawal of projections. You stop unconsciously placing your repressed qualities onto others, and instead, you face them within yourself. The third stage is integration, actively accepting and incorporating the shadow material into your conscious life. This is where the real work happens, and it's uncomfortable. The fourth stage is post-integration reorganization. This is the motivational reformation period that can feel like psychological death. What you're experiencing right now, the lack of motivation, is actually part of this reorganization process. Your ego's old operating system, the one that thrived on fear and approval, has been dismantled. You no longer feel driven by the things that once propelled you forward. This phase feels like emptiness because you've lost the old structure of your motivation, but you haven't yet discovered the new one. Jung's own experience mirrored this. After his break with Freud in 1913, Jung experienced what he described as a period of personal stagnation. He lost all motivation for his academic pursuits. But during this time, he wasn't idle. He was actually undergoing the psychological transformation that would lead to his most important work. His greatest theories emerged from this period that, from the outside, looked like stagnation. So, what happens next? How do you rebuild motivation after shadow work when everything feels empty and directionless? What does your authentic self truly desire, and how can you access it? When you undergo shadow integration, you are no longer driven by external pressures or unconscious compensations. But this shift doesn't mean that you've lost your sense of direction. It means that your authentic desires are beginning to emerge. Jung described a crucial distinction between motivation that comes from the persona, the mask we wear to fit into society, and motivation that arises from the self, the true, integrated aspect of who we are. Before shadow work, much of your motivation was rooted in the persona, the need to succeed, to be seen as worthy, to prove yourself to others. But after shadow work, that external drive fades, and you're left with something quieter, more aligned with your true nature. This new motivation feels different. It doesn't come from force or fear. It's not about proving anything to anyone. Instead, it arises naturally from within, driven by curiosity, passion, and alignment with your true self. As Jung put it, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But this requires letting go of the persona-driven motivation and allowing your authentic desires to take root. In this stage, you might notice that the things that used to excite you now feel dull. Your old ambitions may seem hollow, like a performance you no longer wish to play. But this is part of the process. Your old motivation was never truly yours. It was a reflection of unconscious desires. Now, you're waiting for something real to emerge, and that takes time. But how do you recognize when this true motivation is ready to surface? What signs should you look for, and how do you know when you're truly aligned with your authentic desires? Jung's most profound insight about motivation is that it is not something we force. It is something we allow to emerge naturally, through active imagination and deep attention to our inner processes. Instead of asking, "What should I accomplish?" Jung taught that we should ask, "What is trying to emerge through me today?" When you stop forcing yourself to achieve, when you stop chasing external goals that no longer resonate, you make space for your authentic desires to rise. This new motivation doesn't feel like the frantic energy of ambition. It feels quiet, almost boring compared to your old drive. But it is sustainable, nourishing, and completely aligned with your deepest self. As Jung noted, the years when I was pursuing my inner images were the most important in my life. In them, everything essential was decided. Jung didn't force himself back into his old patterns. Instead, he listened to his unconscious, and from that space, his greatest contributions emerged. This shift from external, ego-driven motivation to internal, self-aligned motivation is the essence of individuation. It's the process of becoming who you truly are. It's not about pushing yourself to succeed, it's about trusting the process and allowing your true self to emerge. If you're currently in this transition phase, feeling lost or unmotivated after shadow work, comment below, "I trust my psyche's timing." The emptiness you feel is not failure, it is the space for your true self to emerge. Let's continue this journey of self-discovery together.